Oh dear, oh dear. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is using every means possible to get rid of refugees. And now he even wants to ship them back to a lonely island in the Atlantic. So the Tories put asylum seekers on a ship, as you all know. And this amateurish asylum policy will probably not help them in the next elections either. But they are planning even more drastic measures. If the controversial plan to house asylum seekers in Rwanda fails, the volcanic island of Ascension will come into play again. The proposal was rejected in 2020 as unworkable. But what else is this government planning? But let's stick with that. So far, Great Britain wanted to ship asylum seekers to the East African Rwanda, where they are to await the outcome of their procedures. For Rwanda, not Britain. And now the government is tightening up its plans and is talking about this tiny volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic. So, a volcanic island in the middle of the South Atlantic, around 1600 kilometers from the African mainland, is supposed to help the British government out of its misguided migration policy. On Monday, the Home Office confirmed media reports that London was examining the British overseas island Ascension Island as a potential location for offloading asylum seekers. In the middle of the Atlantic, there is where this island is, and the British and the Americans have a military base there. Sounding rockets have also been launched from Ascension in the past. Otherwise, there is not much on the island, only the Brazilian green turtle lays its eggs there on the beach. And now the British government is considering bringing the unwelcome boat people to the lonely island, who are waiting for their asylum applications to be processed and are meanwhile staying in British hotels at taxpayers' expense. The plan shows the government's desperation to fulfill Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's promise to solve the small boat problem by the end of the year. For the Tories, the summer months are kind of an endurance test of their migration policy. Although immigration across the English Channel at around 45,800 people was only a small proportion of the total migration of 1.2 million people last year, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has made it his core pledge that the small boats will be stopped and put a stop to criminal gangs, but so far without any success. And there's much to criticize about the British government. And Boris Johnson's end at 10 Downing Street hasn't changed that much. If the radical change does not succeed there, the vote out of the Tories in the general elections next year is almost inevitable. Of course, they will not submit to their fate without a fight, and to do so, they resort to a method that is particularly popular with Conservatives in times of crisis: a tough asylum and migration policy. By wielding the populist club and resorting to gimmicky measures that are either superfluous or not conducive to a real solution, cheap headlines are produced in the hope that they will resonate with the electorate. But that is something we know already. But the British government does not seem capable of even such simple sleight of hand. And this can be seen in the Rwanda plan, according to which asylum seekers with no possibility of returning are to be brought to this East African country. But that was not even remotely checked legally, so that courts have so far prevented implementation. Without having deported a single person, more than £160 million have already been transferred to Kigali. And now for the next crazy ideas. The first asylum seekers have been accommodated on a huge barge. We talked about this. At the same time, more such ships are to be made available, despite safety concerns from authorities and protests from residents and aid organizations. And many port authorities have already given the government the cold shoulder here. Instead, asylum seekers continue to be accommodated in expensive hotels because the government has not been able to provide adequate, cheaper accommodation for years. And this is dilettantism in its purest form and shows that even populism needs to be learned. The British government continues to try to deter migrants with their drastic laws, and critics accuse the cabinet always of this populist activism. And they are right. So, they now even want to crack down on lawyers who help migrants falsify asylum applications. Lawyers who advise migrants on fraudulently staying in the country could face life imprisonment for aiding illegal immigration. That's what the Home Office in London announced on Tuesday. Fraudulent immigration lawyers must be rooted out and brought to justice, was said by Home Secretary Suella Braverman. The vast majority act with integrity, but we know that some lie to help illegal immigrants trick the system, said this hardliner. And earlier, the Daily Mail newspaper reported that several lawyers had helped an undercover reporter file a false asylum claim for a fee of thousands of pounds. Critics, on the other hand, accused the government of populist activism here. The Industry Association Law Society emphasized that the necessary laws are already in force. The government should address the significant backlog of asylum applications rather than a tiny minority of lawyers. And the government is also tightening its tone on the controversial accommodation of migrants on the barge off the coast of southern England. After around 20 men had defended themselves against the move to the 3-story boat BB Stockholm with the help of a lawyer, the Home Office issued an ultimatum to them to move to the barge, as the broadcaster Sky News reports. Otherwise, state support could be withdrawn, according to the Ministry of the Interior, the Home Office. The first 15 asylum seekers arrived on the BB Stockholm on Monday. A total of 500 people will be accommodated there. And the government is also tightening their tone around this. And we all know Suella Braverman, as we did Priti Patel before her. And we know why they're doing this. But this is quite, I don't know how to put it. It's not just populism. This is, in many cases, just pure racism, what we see there. And you can discuss about bringing them to those boats. 500 might not be the right thing for something usually used for 200. But there are only those 15 aboard now. This corresponds to about 1% of the 50,000 migrants to live in hotels on tax costs. And Rishi Sunak's government wants to use other similar accommodation ships now. And the aim is to reduce costs in this way, and people arriving in the UK without a permit should be provided with basic but adequate accommodation. They couldn't expect to stay in a 4-star hotel, they say. Critics accuse the government of relying on deterrence and wanting to send a signal to the population that nobody is taking advantage of the system. And the Illegal Migration Act, recently passed by Parliament, we talked about this, provides for the deportation of almost all refugees who've entered the country illegally, which is illegal on the other hand. But those affected are to be taken into custody without judicial review and then flown out, either to their home country or to Rwanda, or perhaps now to a volcanic island. But as I said, the number of people who entered the country via the English Channel was just 45,000 last year. And although conservative forces had announced with Brexit migration would decrease, the overall migration has exploded. There has been no readmission agreement with the EU that they always wanted. But why should the EU do this? They are not part of the EU anymore, so that way they will not get rid of them. But nevertheless, they are blowing up the whole topic just for political reasons and because of the election. And that's why Ellie said this right recently in Germany. We call the summer saure Gurkenzeit because the newspapers are hard to find any topics because everyone is on holiday. But nevertheless, that they are trying stuff like this and just want to see the reaction of the people, testing it for the next election. Ugh, seriously. Nevertheless, if you want to know more about Brexit or UK politics, you find the next video here in the end screen. If you want to have a chat with me regularly or occasionally and with other viewers, have a look at the banner up there, and I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.